Welcome to the Chronic Spoonful podcast, where we discuss real life with real chronic illness. Each week, we'll cover an aspect of real life spoony living and what that can mean for different chronic illnesses. We hope this will be a place you can go for updated spoony info and where you'll find humor, because, we're a little crazy, important information, and community. As a disclaimer, we just want to remind you that yes, we'll be talking about chronic illness and health information, but we are not your doctor. Everyone's chronic illness is different, and we are absolutely not MDs, so we are not qualified to give you medical advice. We're going to tell you unequivocally to discuss anything we talk about on this podcast with your doctor.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are excited today. We have a guest who's going to talk to us a little bit about endometriosis. We have Madison with us. I met Madison on TikTok. She runs a couple different companies. She has the Endo Resistance that talks about and educates on endometriosis. And then she has the Sour Collective, which is a magazine that she runs. And both these things are very informative. And we asked her to come on the show today to talk about her experience with endometriosis. And it's to educate us a little bit about what it is and how we would move forward with it. So Madison, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about, who you are and your experiences and give us a little background.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. And first of all, thank you both of you for having this podcast. I'm a huge fan. So endometriosis itself, the diagnosis actually already is a point of contention. So the World Health Organization defines it as a disease where tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus. So it's actually on a cellular level, the cells that make up that tissue, and they can grow anywhere in your body. It has officially been found on every organ in the human body. So it is a full body illness, and it does obviously pertain to fertility and our reproductive system. But like I said, it's a whole body disease, and it can cause such a wide variety of symptoms, which is why I think it's really important to try to gain awareness of it. It's obviously really complex, and being that it only affects people assigned female at birth, it has less of a medical understanding. So my goal is really to make endo warriors, healthcare professionals, and loved ones of endo warriors just a little bit more aware of the disease and the lifestyle that goes with it, I guess.
Okay, awesome. I think it's really important to talk about endometriosis because one, a lot of women suffer from this, and it's also highly underdiagnosed in women. It's often written off as cramps or just your hormones.
Or hysteria. You're just a hysterical female. Yep.
Oh, it's just anxiety. Here's some Xanax. You'll be fine.
I forget I believe it's an average of 7 years that it usually takes to get diagnosed, which is insane. And I feel like one of the first things I try to get out there is that I know I'm privileged and extremely lucky. I had painful periods for forever, for 10 years, but that we're all told that's normal. That's a really unfortunate misconception about endometriosis or about periods. But I didn't actually have chronic pelvic pain until about less than a year before I was diagnosed, which living in it was awful. It was a very painful, scary year, not knowing where the pain's coming from. But comparatively, I am so lucky to have gotten diagnosed that early. Now that said, I was seeing a gynecologist, not a specialist, and I had ablation surgery. There's endometrial ablation where they kind of get rid of the whole lining. I didn't have that. I had where they laser the endometriosis. And unfortunately, that surgery is not the best for endometriosis. I didn't know that at the time, and it ended up causing a lot more damage than help for me. And it wasn't until 6 months after that I had another surgery that I was actually able to get a little bit of pain relief. I'm obviously still in that journey, but that's, again, part of why I want to advocate so badly is I thought I was pretty well educated. I have the access to doctors. I know I have that privilege, and yet I still ended up getting a surgery that made me worse off. But it's interesting to navigate in the endometriosis community because there's kind of a problem where people have these black and white opinions. So while ablation was terrible for me, there's people that'll shame you if you get ablation or just tell you it's wrong and that excision is the only way to go. Excision's like twice as expensive as ablation. So
Wow.
as much as I want to advocate and say, like, you know, maybe try to see a specialist before you just have your regular gyno operate on you, or like I can advocate for these things, but I'm really careful not to shame anyone and not to have those black and white opinions, because first of all, not everyone has money or privilege, but also it's healthcare. Every body is different. There's no template to follow. And I think there's a big problem. I know there's a big problem in the endo community. I'm assuming with all invisible illnesses.
It is.
You can't have those black and white opinions about health.
No, and that's really key. You can't, like, for me, I, you know, when with the EDS, some like part of it is with, I have POTS, and one of the treatments for POTS is to put you on like blood pressure medication to decrease your blood pressure, but I have really low blood pressure. So they can't put me on the things that I need.
Right.
And, you know, so it's like, while people were like, oh, just take that. And you're like, I can't. Well, why not? You know, so it's the same thing with endometriosis, and Nicole will tell you with lupus, everyone has an opinion.
Absolutely.
Everyone does, but everybody is different, and you made a good point. Talk to your doctor. You know, it's great that people have been through it and they'll give you advice of like, you know, I had excision. It was the best thing for me. Ask why ablation worked for someone else really well or didn't work for them. Get as much information as you can, but ultimately it's the discussion between you and your doctor.
I totally agree. And I think kind of a combination of those is so important, where if you have, before I was chronically ill, I had 100% trust in every doctor I ever saw that they were treating me great. And then after, like I said, I had a not so great surgery. So it's kind of, I love that we have this like access to people's stories through social media. Facebook in particular, there's 1 million into like endometriosis support groups that have taught me honestly more than any doctor ever has.
Yeah, definitely.
But those are just people on the internet. So it's so important to take all of it with a grain of salt. Be very careful about what healthcare providers you're seeing, get second, third, fourth opinions. But at the end of the day, your healthcare should, like, the actions you actually take should at least be checked off by a doctor.
Oh, yeah. I've said that to people forever. I've told people, you know, it is so important that you see more than one doctor. If your insurance allows, if you can afford it, see 3, see 4 before you have the surgery. And also do your own research. Write down your questions, bring them in to each doctor. You know, it's all that's very important in your care.
Absolutely.
And yes, 100%. I think we advocate for that every episode. Talk to your doctor.
Yeah, literally, it's so important. And I think
what you brought up a good point too, is if you can afford it.
Yes, so important. And so like not commonly acknowledged when people talk about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But healthcare, unfortunately, it shouldn't be, but in America, it's a privilege. It's good healthcare.
It is. You're 100% right.
Well, and it's getting, you know, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but it's getting a little wonkier for us too, especially with women's health. But I think you also brought up a good point of how long it actually takes to get diagnosed with endometriosis, because women's health is definitely under-researched.
Absolutely.
And not talked about as much. And, you know, with chronic illness, it tends to present itself more in women than in men. At most chronic illnesses are that way. But, you know, when we talk about women's reproductive health, it is not researched at the level of men's. It just isn't.
So the US is like where a lot of our medical research comes from. And I learned recently that women weren't included or weren't required to be included in clinical trials until 1993. And the reasoning was because our bodies are so complex, which is why we need research.
Well, it's kind of like in the body image episode, we talk about BMI, and BMI was researched on wealthy white men.
It does not apply to us.
Race, sex, ethnicity, geography. It just was a small group of white men. It was never meant to be used. And so, you know, when we talk about women's reproductive health research, there is not much there.
Not at all. It's so terrifying, honestly, to be a person with a uterus, to have a chronic illness that has to do with that, and to know that even the people that you're supposed to trust in that are researching medicine, science, they don't really care about us.
No, they don't. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. We are the minority.
We are. And now imagine if you were a woman of color.
Absolutely.
That can even, because our bodies are complex, and as much as people say, well, you should be colorblind, no,
there are differences.
And some of it has to do with where we live and their cultures, and just biologically we just have to pay attention to these things. Like someone who lives in the southern United States definitely has different issues than someone who lives in Minnesota.
Absolutely.
You have to take in things holistically. Someone who lives in Nigeria is living in a different way than someone who lives in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot of factors that go into that, and they're not looking at that. But women definitely are understudied.
Yes,
our bodies are misunderstood.
Absolutely.
I remember when I was having my gastrointestinal problems, which are actually now they've found are due to mast cell. One of the first things they did was a vaginal ultrasound because they thought it could have been endometriosis.
Yeah, absolutely. Which then is, that's always the first step, and you can't find endometriosis on ultrasound. So
I know
even the approach, like from the get-go, needs reform.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you doing this when you have to do a laparoscopic procedure to actually give me a diagnosis?
I had to have like 4 ultrasounds before my surgery, which again is very low. I'm still like the lucky one, but they kept checking and they're like, well, we don't see anything, but you can't find it on ultrasound. I'm like, make this make sense.
Yes. And then the insurance companies are whining that they're spending all this money. And you're like, well, if you would actually put people in the proper position to begin with, you wouldn't be spending thousands before the one procedure. It's ridiculous.
It makes no sense.
None.
Agreed. So in the process, can you talk a little bit about what your process was like getting diagnosed?
Absolutely.
What were the steps? I mean, I know it happened relatively quickly for you, but talk a little bit about that, because there's a lot of weird things that happen to get into to finally get the diagnosis even before a procedure.
Absolutely. I was definitely kind of one of those. I was having ovarian cysts that were really big and eventually rupturing and causing me pain. And it was for forever. And then between birth control and some different things, we finally managed it, but the pelvic pain stayed. And they started thinking it might be some kind of like debris from the cysts. And cysts, there's endometriomas, which can relate to endometriosis. I don't believe what I had anything to do with that. So technically ovarian cysts doesn't equal endometriosis, but it brought on my pain, which who knows if it really has to do with each other, if it just kind of sparked up the endo pain, but it made my doctors and I just start to pay a little bit more attention. And we were trying a couple different things with birth control. And part of the way I got diagnosed quickly, which I'm not giving myself necessarily a pat on the back here. I'm lucky that my doctor was just kind of like, whatever you want to do. But I started researching endometriosis. I started bringing it up, and it was on our list, a long list of possible diagnoses, which is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And the surgery, getting a laparoscopic surgery kind of addresses a lot of those issues. So it was the natural next step, but it wasn't until I had an appointment that I said, hey, I'm done. Like, I don't want more exams. I don't want more medication, and I don't want to live in pain. So I think that leaves us at surgery. My doctor's like, yeah, I guess that's next. So it was very me driven, but that's because I happen to have a doctor that let that happen, which I'm thankful for. I just wish in that moment she had sent me up to a specialist that performed excision, but we did ablation and I got a diagnosis. I can't be too mad at that surgery because it did land me in the right position. When I didn't start to get relief from that surgery, that's when I switched to, I didn't even know these existed, but an endometriosis specialist. And he does excision. He actually doesn't even do ablation, which again, I know that works for some people, but that kind of gave me some validation, like we're on a different path now. And I won't tell you I'm pain-free, but I've actually got like a healthcare plan. The surgery helped a lot. I feel like I'm in much better hands now. But like I said, I have to be grateful that doctor kind of let me like, let's do it and get my diagnosis, because I could still be in that confusing, unknown pain region where a lot of people stay for years and years and years. So I'm grateful for it, but it's still chronic illness. It still sucks.
We preach that all the time. A lot of people with chronic illness have to do their own research into their different symptoms and ask the questions. And you can even preface the question with like, this might be silly,
Yep.
But have we looked at, this disease? Have we looked at this disease?
Mm-hmm.
And doctors, I would refrain from saying, I Googled it and I found.
Absolutely. They dismiss that.
No doctor likes to be told that Google's better at diagnosing them than they are.
Sometimes,
but it's what we do because you're trying to figure everything out, or you're looking at your own blood tests and you're like, what is that test? And what does this mean? And
absolutely.
Like, we have way more medical knowledge than a layperson should have.
Yes. We should have our own degrees.
Because Nicole's a nurse, she better have the medical knowledge.
But we should have like a degree in chronic illness at this point.
Right.
Yes. And it's shocking how much, patients know. They know so much. And I think sometimes the doctor's pride gets in the way and they don't listen.
Yes.
Well, you have to, because you don't necessarily just see one doctor, you're seeing 6 different doctors and they're not all talking to one another.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You have to kind of track your own stuff so you can, go see your gynecologist and be like, well, my rheumatologist is doing this and my dentist is doing this, because dental health is also important.
Yes.
And, my cardiologist says this. And so you have to be that middleman between all of your team.
Absolutely.
So, but it's really good that you advocated for yourself, because a lot of people don't know how to do that. They're afraid of offending the doctor. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. But in the end, if your doctor is not going to listen to you, that shouldn't be your doctor. And that's, of course, me talking from a place of privilege, because I can switch doctors anytime.
Yes.
But no doctor likes to hear that you're going to sue them, but you can always say it.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to kind of plug myself too hard here, but you mentioned my magazine, The Sour Collective, and that's actually part of why I made my magazine. We cover everything. Every issue has a different topic, and we've talked about the feelings of isolation in the pandemic. We talked about climate change. Every issue is a topic I'm obviously passionate about. So naturally, the endometriosis issue had to happen. And we feature lots of artwork and photography by people. It's more of like an entertainment magazine, but the endometriosis issue was something I really wanted to put out, and eventually led to me starting the Endo Resistance, because I was like, okay, this is more than a one-time project. But a big part of the magazine is advocating for yourself. So there's the centerfold is a big guide on how to self-advocate to your doctors.
I love that.
Thank you. There's also a tear out page that you can tear out and bring to your doctor that helps you track your pain, but in more of this is how many times a week it's keeping me from doing my work, or keeping me from visiting my family, or, because it does have to do with endometriosis, keeping me from having sex. Because to me, if you ask me to give you a pain number and we're working with different scales, that's not helpful. I would rather my doctor know, hey, I just lived a week of my life that did not feel like I'm living my life. What can we do to fix it? So I
got into that with my neurologist about that one time. He's like, well, where would you rate it? And I'm like, don't ask me that question.
Right.
Ask me how my pain is impacting my life, because that's going to tell you a lot more.
That's so much more important. And that's so much more like patient forward.
Yes.
Or I guess like our life, our body, like we need to keep like healthy, but we're in it to live a good life. And being that I'm 22 with a chronic illness, and a lot of doctors want to start talking about fertility or pregnancy, I'm just trying not to be in pain right now.
Yeah,
and, I don't want to cancel plans or not be able to go to work. I'm 22.
Exactly.
Right? That's mainly what
so much life in front of you, and sitting there and crying, like it's almost like they dismiss the pain.
Agreed.
It's just part of your life, but we'll move on to the thing. No, I want to talk about the pain.
Absolutely.
But that's the other side of it. Like pain, when you're in chronic pain, your pain scales are off.
Yeah.
Like they're not a healthy person's pain scale. Like for me, a 6 would probably lay someone else in bed.
Yeah. Exactly.
If I tell you I'm at a 6, that's a decent day for me.
Yes. I had a doctor ask me where you are right now. What level are you at? And I was like, I guess I would say like a 4. And he's like, that's good. That's low. I'm like, this is right now me just sitting here being fine. I'm at a 4. That's not good. Like,
no,
right.
No, and you shouldn't have to have it.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
You shouldn't have to have it. You shouldn't have to, there shouldn't be an acceptable level.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that. Why aren't we focusing on making that acceptable level nothing? That's the part that gets me,
Right. And that's kind of the attitude that it's like, well, you have a chronic illness, so just go live in pain, but I don't want to see it. Just go do it over there.
Yeah. It's like, just deal with it. You'll be, you could be worse. That's what they tell you too. It could be worse.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we're all probably so often told how many people have it worse than us.
Oh God, it's disgusting, isn't it?
Right? And I feel so bad for other people, but I'm in control of my body and my healthcare, and that's all I can really fully control.
Yes, so exactly. And it's like, if I were feeling better, I would love to help those people who have it worse.
Exactly.
But I don't feel better, so help me feel better so I can help them.
Totally. Yeah. And you can't dismiss how I feel because someone else feels worse.
Right.
It doesn't mean how I feel isn't important.
Exactly. And that's even an issue within the endo community. A lot of doctors don't use it now, but traditionally you're given a stage of your endometriosis. I never was, because it's more complex than 4 stages, because like I said, you can get it anywhere in your body. So someone could have stage 1 endometriosis, so it's not so bad, but in their lungs. It's still very severe.
Yes.
So that's why we don't use the staging so much anymore. But a lot of times if you start talking about your endometriosis, and if someone does bring up a stage number and it's not a 3 or a 4 on social media, a lot of times the comments are like, well, I have a 4, so, and goes into how they have it so much worse. But we're all supposed to be banding together, I thought.
But you can also have a very mild case, and based on where it is in your body, it can be causing you immense amounts of pain. People can have stage 4 and not have that much pain, but it could be still debilitating because of where it is. Yes. They're not in pain, but it's a severe case. But some people might, be at stage 1 and they could be in immense amounts of pain.
Absolutely. And it's, at the end of the day, it's not healthy. It's not good for any of us. Some people have no pain with endometriosis. They don't find out they have it until they try to conceive and they have fertility issues. Well, those fertility issues are still devastating. They don't have it better than me because they never had that chronic pain.
That's right.
Because they're trying to have a baby and they want that baby so badly. And now they're being told either they can't or it's going to be insanely difficult.
Yes, which is sad. It's really depressing when things that are so easy for other people are so hard. It's up in the air. I'm 22. I'm not having babies anytime soon. We're not speaking that into existence. But when the time comes, hopefully it's simple. We don't know, up in the air. But even being pain-free, having to do my physical therapy stretches every morning so that I don't have pain. It's so frustrating that we have to put in work to get to where everyone else is.
Yes.
And it's so easy to just be mad at that and say, I'm not going to put in any of the work and get worse. It's a constant fight with myself, at least personally.
No, it is.
Me too.
It's even more than a physical fight with your own body. It's a psychological fight with your own body.
100%. I am very much so a victim of capitalism and am very mad at myself when I'm not getting a certain amount of work done, especially because I am my own boss owning a business. But literally the reason I work for myself is some days I can't physically do the things that another boss might require of me. But it's so hard not to be hard on yourself, even knowing all of that.
Yes.
Agreed. 100%.
So let's step back a little bit. Let's talk about the treatments for endometriosis, because you've talked about ablation. You've talked about excision. What other things have doctors tried? Sorry, my voice is going.
No, you're fine. So I think it's important to start with, I think it's pretty obvious, but there is no cure for endometriosis. And the reason that I feel the need to say that is, unfortunately, within the endometriosis community, we're not just fighting a lack of information. There's actually misinformation being shared out there. I could name names, but I'm not going to make people really mad at your podcast. But there's some really big people in the endo community that are saying that certain medications and surgeries are cures when they're not. But some of the things that can help, doctors are really quick to prescribe birth control. It can hurt, it can help. Essentially, in my opinion, it's a little bit of a Band-Aid, but when you are in pain and you need relief, you sometimes just need a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
The other main probably medication would be Orilissa. It's similar to the Lupron. Or
I was going to ask you if they were still doing Lupron. Okay.
Yeah, it's similar. It's a pill. I could probably more eloquently say this, but it essentially puts you into like a mini menopause.
It's brutal.
Yeah. I take that medication. I can tell you it's real brutal.
Yes, brutal.
Kind of having a hot flash as we speak. Which in its own is a big mental struggle to feel like a woman in her 50s or 60s at 22.
Yes,
but
girl.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate that there's a lot of like side effects and complications and risks with every single treatment option for endometriosis. And I know I keep kind of referencing the endometriosis community. I don't mean to be so negative about it, but a big part of what I want to do is kind of fix these issues within it. And back to that black and white thinking, a lot of people hate Orilissa and Lupron. And I would almost say not incorrectly so, but it's the shaming people for taking it. I have literally been kicked out of a couple Facebook groups for talking about Orilissa and not even saying it's great, just saying I take it. And again, there's privilege. There's a lot of people that take that because they can't afford the surgery. And also just healthcare. Everyone's body is different. I take it because I'm not going to have a third surgery when they're not finding anything in these surgeries. It works for me. Everyone's different.
Yeah.
But those are really the main treatment options, which you'll notice there's not a lot.
Nope.
Yeah. So a big part of what I want to advocate for, which is kind of hard because it's well above my head, but just trying to get more research, because we're not going to get anywhere when they're not even thinking of how to find a solution. So obviously a cure is the big goal for people with endometriosis, but just more treatment options would be awesome.
Yes. And the thing is with endometriosis, it's not necessarily a rare disease. It's,
right.
You say endometriosis to people, they've heard the word.
Yes.
Not necessarily understanding what it exactly is, but they've heard it and they know it causes pain.
Yes.
That's actually like, they just think a lot of people just think it's like regular menstrual cramps, which it is not.
Yes.
But, they've heard of it.
Right.
Obviously, the extreme decision is a hysterectomy.
Yes. Sorry.
No. But that's very extreme. It's very
extreme. It obviously is taking away your opportunity to conceive later in life, which just isn't an option for everyone. And remembering that endometriosis is a full body issue, it doesn't fix it. And it doesn't even stop it from growing. A lot of people think, well, it's created from your ovaries because that's where estrogen comes from. Endometriosis creates its own estrogen. It's a little monster in your body and it does not stop. But then on the flip side, those black and white thinkers will shame someone for having a hysterectomy and say, well, it's not a cure, right? Well, some people, they getting rid of their ovaries because that's where they get a lot of problems helps them. Some people are suspected to have adenomyosis, which is essentially like endometriosis inside the uterus. And the only way to diagnose and treat that is a hysterectomy.
I had a friend who had that, and she was in excruciating pain. Like she was doubled over all the time. And they finally had to give her the hysterectomy, but she was shamed but it worked for her. It changed her life.
Yes, every body is different, which I just can't believe people shame you for your personal healthcare journey. So while I agree hysterectomies are not an answer, for some individuals, they are.
They are. But I think we go back to this idea that a woman's body isn't her own. And we talked a little bit about it before that, we were going to bring this up. So trigger warning to everybody. We're going to talk about the Roe v. Wade decision. It's just like people always have opinions about women having babies and making decisions about their reproductive organs. But that's what's going on inside your own body. Like if a hysterectomy, like you say, on those small percentage of women that it actually would work, then it's their decision.
Exactly.
Like, first of all, not everybody wants to have babies.
Yep.
It was me. I'm raising both hands. I never had any kids and never wanted any, and I'm okay with that.
It's absolutely our right to choose.
Yes,
absolutely, because it's what's going on inside our bodies, and if it is something that could potentially help someone, and they're like, I don't want kids. Now, a hysterectomy comes with its own set of issues.
Yes,
believe me, my mom had one at 30 due to endometriosis, because at that time that's what they did. They just cut it all out. She went through a lot afterwards, and I was like, I think 8 or 9 years old, and I did not understand it as a child.
Yes, I mean, I barely understand it as a 22-year-old. So,
right? Like I wasn't understanding her mood swings because she was going through an early menopause from it. So it's an extreme decision, but it is ultimately the woman's decision to go through with that surgery.
Yes.
Then there's other reasons too, and the reason I say we don't study enough of women's reproductive health is why we're seeing Roe v. Wade get overturned.
People don't know what it entails because they know nothing about our bodies.
That's right.
But like with chronic illnesses, there's so many things that can go wrong with being pregnant, having a baby. You know, there's just, our bodies are just different in how we handle that type of stuff. And when you have endometriosis, it can actually cause many fertility issues. And the fact that Roe v. Wade is getting overturned, and there are states that are going to make miscarriages and IVF, they're going to criminalize that.
Yep.
That is very scary for this community.
Yeah, there were 2 big studies done by the University of Oxford, and I believe the final result was that people with endometriosis have an increased risk of miscarriage or of ectopic pregnancy of up to 80%.
Wow.
So apart from overturning Roe versus Wade being misogynistic and stupid and all these things I could call it, it's also ableist. We're more at risk for these things. And even if, because some people will tell you, oh, they're not really criminalizing it, which I could give you source after source as to how some individual states are, but also even without criminalizing it, you're making it harder to receive healthcare for a miscarriage or for an ectopic pregnancy, which actually with an ectopic pregnancy, if you're not treated, you're more or less left to die.
You're going to die.
You'll become septic and die.
Yep.
Yes, that's the answer. So that people will die.
I tell people all the time, it bugs me because they're like, well, it's a pregnancy. I'm like, it's not a real pregnancy.
No,
I'm like, you know.
No baby is coming out of that.
No. But people don't understand that. They're like, you're murdering a baby. I'm like, you aren't even listening to the medical part of this.
Right.
You know, medically.
It is not a baby. It is not viable.
No. Right. And you can terminate the clump of cells and let the woman live, or you can terminate them both.
That's right. No baby's coming out of that regardless.
Nothing. And honestly, even with very healthy women choosing to have abortions, which everyone has their own opinion on, but statistically, likely, if you're not letting them get medically safe abortions, they still will have them. So I don't think we're not going to have this increase of babies. We're going to have an increase of deaths. And
that's right.
Trauma. It's nothing good is coming out of this.
No. And it's just especially bad for the chronically ill.
Absolutely.
So many of our bodies cannot handle a pregnancy.
And what we're talking about is bodily autonomy. Who knows what's next? Because
yeah,
bodily autonomy outside of pregnancy, I used my bodily autonomy to have the surgery that led to my diagnosis. What if we can't do that? That goes beyond that. That's everyone.
You know, we're concerned your doctor could ruin you being a birthing vessel for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't have bodily autonomy, you don't have much else. most of our rights start with the just kind of assumption that you have bodily autonomy.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I agree.
It is.
It's going to change the gynecological world, because doctors are going to constantly question whether they can do what they're doing for women. And how are they going to do research? Like, how are they going to get people to volunteer for research? How are they,
agreed.
What if a woman who is pregnant goes to, let's say one day you do get pregnant and the doctor says, okay, well, let's study you because you have endometriosis and a pregnancy, and heaven forbid the baby dies.
Right.
Or your body can't handle the baby. Could they go after the doctor saying, well, it's because you were studying her?
Right.
Now
exactly.
You're liable, or go after you for losing the baby because you didn't take good enough care for the baby. It like a miscarriage isn't traumatic enough. Like not being able to have kids is traumatic enough. Like, all of these things. Like now you have to worry about going to jail.
Right. It's horrible. And it's
because a bunch of old white men don't get it.
Right.
And they really don't get it.
It's opening the doors to affecting them too. Like,
yes.
I don't know if they realize this, that men have bodies too.
Yes.
Well, eventually women are going to say, you know what? If that's what's going to happen, we're not going to have sex at all.
Yeah.
Because we cannot put ourselves, not that all pregnancies come out of sex, but I'm saying out of, some are rape, some are consensual, but I'm saying the women that can say I'm done, they're going to be done. And they're going to say,
Absolutely.
if you have no consequence, we're not doing anything. Have sex with each other, and that's it.
Yep. It's ridiculous.
It's insane.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying for this community. But I think, when we're talking about endometriosis, it's especially terrifying because I know several people with endometriosis that couldn't carry
Yeah, me too.
A fetus to term. Like,
Yeah.
it's
common, incredibly common, sadly.
Yeah,
and
sadly.
What we should be focusing on is minimizing that and researching the
Yeah.
actual problems more, not making it harder.
But then again, I have read many articles where they asked men about women's reproductive health, and some of them still think we can stop our periods.
Yep.
Just hold it in. No big deal.
Ugh.
Wish.
Right?
Awesome.
Or they think we're hemorrhaging.
Yep.
Yeah.
You must be hemorrhaging blood. I'm going to make you a steak. You need more iron.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It is just some people still think using a tampon is taking away your virginity.
Yep.
There's so much ignorance. It's sad.
But seriously, the number of white men making these laws that don't even understand. There was a state, I don't remember who posted it on TikTok. I don't know if it was on TikTok or Instagram where I was watching. I think it was Instagram. And someone posted a hearing on their state legislation. And I don't remember which state it was because I was so appalled by this legislator. All I could think about was how terrible this was. And he was asking why they left an exception in the law for rape, incest, and ectopic pregnancy. And he was talking to a doctor. And the doctor was trying to explain ectopic pregnancy. And he's like, but that's still a baby. But that's still a baby. And she's just trying to explain that no one survives this. And then he went on to be like, well, why should we punish the father, even though he's a what did he say, sex pervert or something? Why should we punish him for not being able to have a kid? Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh, are you listening to yourself?
And it's crazy because a lot of the argument comes from lack of knowledge on women's bodies, or the other side of it, a lot of it comes from religion or personal beliefs. And I think a lot of the times it's hard, even on our end, where you're fighting to not overturn Roe versus Wade. Sometimes it's hard to zoom out. Like, you're fighting so hard with someone. It's not a baby. It's a clump of cells. It's not murder. It's healthcare. At the end of the day, pro-choice is pro-choice. You can have opinions, but it's the concept of the law dictating what you can do with your body. And I'm so surprised at the people that support it. Meanwhile, they have such an issue with the law having any awareness of their finances or the guns in their home.
Exactly.
It's the same thing. It should not be part of the law.
I mean, I agree with you. And a lot of the reason I agree with you is because it impacts this community so much. It just does. We have a different perspective on healthcare because of all the things going on in our bodies. And again, it just ignores the chronically ill and their needs. Nicole and I have talked about this a number of times, especially during COVID, where we've said, they're rolling all this stuff back, but what about the people who are immunocompromised? What about the people that can't do this or can't do that?
Yeah.
And it gets completely ignored. And in the issue of, abortion is healthcare, the chronically ill get impacted by this the most. The poor, chronically ill, the people who need it the most are going to lose.
Absolutely.
And we will see women die. And we will definitely be seeing women with endometriosis die.
Yes.
It's going to happen. But I do worry about how it's going to change a doctor's perspective when they're looking at a woman's body.
Totally.
I worry about that. Like, are women going to now be even more underdiagnosed with endometriosis because doctors are afraid to do the proper exams or the proper research? What's happen with this?
Absolutely. And already we see, before the possible overturning of Roe versus Wade, even at my doctor's office, if I tell them that I'm having issues with pain during sexual intercourse, they will open up their notes and write that I'm having pain with tampons. And it took like 3 visits of this happening for me to ask my doctor. I was like, I don't use tampons. Why do you keep writing that? And he's like, oh, I probably should have told you. Insurance won't cover it if we talk about sex. So I have to talk about tampons. Like, they're already navigating this anti-woman structure to help us or to protect themselves, whatever the intention is. They already have to navigate around it. So now add all this, I wouldn't know what to do as a doctor. And in a way, they're going to try to protect us too. but
right,
it's
because
hurting our bodies.
Yep.
Most people don't become doctors because they're like, I want to be a rich doctor.
Yep, exactly.
It's so much work to be a doctor, and it's so hard.
Yeah.
And yes, we complain about doctors on this show all the time, but we're not complaining about all doctors. We're complaining about certain doctors.
Right.
But doctors get into healthcare because they actually want to help people.
Yes.
And it's like, and if you're in the OBGYN world, you know, most of them want to try and help a woman.
Yeah, absolutely.
With their health. So it's, the fact that he has to write something different in the chart because of insurance is a whole other issue.
Oh Lord, yeah.
And navigating that
is
so bad.
And again,
there's amazing creators out there that do like really great stuff on insurance on like TikTok and Instagram.
Which is another thing that unfortunately as chronically ill people, we have to navigate more intensely than others, which we shouldn't. It shouldn't be work.
We know the ins and outs because we're dealing with it every day. It's ridiculous.
We deserve a degree.
Yes, we should. We should be getting paid.
Like, yes, we do deserve.
Yes.
We need a degree.
We should be getting paid for this because we know so much.
Yeah, I'll like kind of get into arguments online with people about Roe versus Wade, and they're like, "Well, what's your background? How do you know so much about reproduction?" I'm like, "My body, my own doctor."
That's right.
My body hates me, so I had to figure out why.
Literally,
that's right.
It's so true. It's so true. So moving forward, let's I
could talk for hours about Roe.
I know.
Probably a good idea.
So we talked a little bit about treatments and what works, and what do you see coming in the future for the endometriosis community since you've been doing all this research?
Absolutely. I think really I'm seeing a couple of, more than a couple. I've seen some healthcare providers that are active on social media starting to kind of change their rhetoric. And I think obviously that's where it starts. People with endometriosis, friends and family of endometriosis, they should all know more, but we're not going to get better help until doctors do. So there's a TikTok page. I think it's like the Worldwide Endometriosis March. I probably got that way wrong, but it's a doctor. I don't remember the doctor's name, but it's hard to pronounce. So he calls it something else, which I still screwed up. But he's operated on more endometriosis patients than any other doctor, dead or alive.
Wow.
So I would consider him one of the most educated on endometriosis. And he really uses that well, because there's a lot of people that they're educated on the disease, but not the patient. So they still kind of misspeak, or he just seems well-rounded. And I'm seeing more and more of that on social media. And I hope that's actually relating to like the real world. And people are receiving like more understanding doctors. I'm hoping that's the future. And I'm hoping that I'm not just being blissfully ignorant. I'm actually seeing that start to get better.
I agree with you. And I think, they're taking the taboo out of the discussion. They're taking the taboo out of talking about sex. They're taking the taboo away from talking about women's reproductive health. I see it too.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And I think all we can do is keep talking about it, even outside of endometriosis, just normalizing periods in general.
Yeah.
My family, I have two sisters. So like we're a very girl family, and it's always been like my dad bought my first tampons. So like I don't really get embarrassed about that. And I think that really would have hindered me if I grew up differently and then started having these issues.
Yes.
So I think seeing people kind of, like you said, taking the taboo out of it, it's already happening, and just kind of leaning into that will really push us forward more than it seems, just changing the way we talk. But I think it'll make a big difference. Outside of that, like I said, all I can really try is to advocate for more research, or more, not just research, but creating more tools. I don't think they want me to say the name of it yet, but I got asked to be on a patient advisory board for an app that's for all chronically ill people that serves as like an administrative assistant on your phone. So it helps you with your doctor's appointments, all these things.
Cool.
I know.
Awesome.
If I get more information on it, I'll send it your way.
Please do.
But I think there's more of these advancements of like tools, like with me with the issue of the magazine. I think while we're trying to advocate for healthcare professionals knowing more, we can also advocate for just making life easier for chronically ill people. And at a certain point, those two will marry, and we'll have less of these misconceptions and less of just mistreating the chronically ill. I hope.
That's too.
The path I'm trying to go down, at least.
You're right. And the advocating can come in different ways. It can be being more open about your own health struggles,
Yes.
Because the more people hear us talk about it, the less taboo it becomes. And then voting is another one. I'm a big advocate for voting and getting out there, and not just in a national election, but in local elections, because we're seeing with the overturning of Roe v. Wade that this is going to go back to the states.
Yep, exactly.
So states are going to make decisions. So it is not just about voting in a national election. It is about voting locally.
Yes. Trust me, I live in Florida. I understand.
Oh no. I will.
I'm so sorry.
My brother is in Florida too, so I'm like, oh,
we're trying our best over here.
I know.
But yeah, I think that's all we can really do is try to
write to your legislators, write to people that matter. Make sure you're reporting things to state boards if they're bad, or even if they're good. Like, it helps them to hear that some doctors are good. Report to your insurance company.
Yes.
I mean, definitely, I've talked to people at my insurance company when I've had a bad doctor experience, and I'm like, please don't refer people to this doctor. This is what happened, and they will put in a report.
That is, I honestly have never thought about doing that, and I have a good list of doctors I could do that about. That is
you and me both.
review them on like Vital Record. Like, there's all these like doctor databases,
even Yelp
reviews.
Even the hospital reviews. There's a place in the hospital that it's associated with that you can leave a review about the doctor. That's reviews.
So absolutely. And I kind of, not that that's leaving reviews, but on social media, there's a lot of people that don't like me because I do this, but I think part of, advocating for bettering the way that we're treated is kind of ugly, and pointing out crappy healthcare providers. So a big issue in endometriosis is there are these big name doctors that people love and they throw out and say they're amazing. Well, coincidentally, a lot of these doctors with their amazing success rates, turns out they'll perform a surgery on an endometriosis patient. And then when the endometriosis patient comes back because they're having post-op problems, it's called patient abandonment. And they literally refuse to see the patient. And the patient has to go find a new healthcare provider, which is very difficult and
not legal.
And yeah, absolutely. But it's common. At least
it is common.
And a lot of people will tell you that doesn't happen. I believe people's firsthand accounts, and I hear quite a bit of stories of people going to these huge name doctors. They're practically celebrities in these Facebook groups, and not being seen for a post-op appointment. So it sucks that people get so mad, but like you said, leaving reviews or on social media, just talking about this, we're not going to get better until we kind of ride through this ugly part and point out the doctors that are mistreating chronically ill patients.
Right, because and also praising the doctors that are doing a good job. So I have friends who are doctors, and so does Nicole. And I think they get kind of upset when we talk about these icky doctors, and there's an Instagram account that's like things my doctors say or whatever it is. And they get really upset at some of these things because they're like, doctors don't say this stuff. I'm like, yes, some doctors do say this stuff. Right. They're like, it makes it look like all doctors are bad. And I'm like, okay, I get that perspective. I do. I understand that perspective. I said, so I think it's a balance. I think you need to praise the doctors that are doing a lot of good, that are doing the right research, that are doing the right testing, that are really looking at the patients. And I think you need to report the doctors that aren't.
I agree.
The doctor's just having a bad day, guys.
Because a lot of them have a lot of doctors, especially specialists, that have, specialties, not your average everyday internist, have God complexes at times and think, you're way beneath them. So sometimes you have to put people in check.
From a nasty patient, and now they're in the room, and they haven't had a chance to let it go.
Yep.
Well, I'm a firm believer that you can report those things, but when you start to see a pattern with the doctor and you're looking at reviews and you're seeing over and over again that something is wrong or people have been misdiagnosed, I think that's a sign. And so
it is.
I think doctors need to be held accountable.
It's very true. Yes.
Just like we're held accountable when we go to work, we're held accountable for our behaviors.
Right.
So, but I think it's important that, especially in our community, that we're talking to one another about these things, that they're being held to, proper standards, and, but women's health, again, it's so, you go in, you're a woman, you go into a doctor, you're like, I'm in pain. They're like, it's anxiety. Here's some medicine.
Literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you on a period?
Yeah. Are you stressed out? Do you just need to take some deep breaths?
Yep. And what's terrible is a lot of times,
and it's not. It's female doctors too. It's not just male doctors.
Oh, yeah. My coincidentally, not because of any bias on my part, my like worst doctor was a female, and my best doctor is a man. So I think
same happened to me.
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
Within like,
but that's
it has nothing within like gynecology. I think a lot of people will say like, oh, don't go to a man doctor because blah 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 blah, and it's well, we're already kind of limiting our options because of how many doctors suck. So we're gonna have to. I was terrified to see my first male guy, or he's an endometriosis specialist, but to see him, it's my first time ever having like an exam like that with a male doctor, and
it can be very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I mean, depending on your level of comfortability or any trauma, like if you just don't want to see a doctor because he's a man, that's well within your right. I'm not saying like, oh, you should. But for me, it was something I was comfortable. I had to push myself, but I was comfortable doing. And he ended up being great. So I think, again, it goes back to that black and white thinking. There's really not much of a cookie cutter. These doctors are good. These doctors are bad. Which is terrifying. And sometimes the ones with glowing reviews are not the best. That's
very
really
true.
hard to navigate.
Very hard to read through and read between the lines and some things. Someone might have a glowing review because that doctor happened to find the one thing that was wrong with them. In that one instance.
And it was a fluke.
And it can also be the other way. Like I say, that doctor could have been having a bad day when he saw that patient. And just, it just was a bad interaction. And also I try to read how knowledgeable the person is writing the review.
Yeah, that's important.
Some people just don't understand medicine in itself, or how hospitals work, or doctors' offices work, or insurance works. And then they put in a bad review of the doctor. Also, don't trust the overall stars. I'm going to say that.
I agree.
Some of it is about their office staff. And I'm like,
yes, always.
Staff is rude.
Oh my God, so true.
I just need the doctor to be good. I don't care about the front desk.
I would never come in expecting like really great administration. That's not what we're here for.
No, I sometimes look at the front desk staff and I'm like, did you just say what you just said?
Literally.
I just need you to think a little bit, boo. But yeah, no, it's
or
and
like
I told
the doctor like a 1-star review because billing was off. And I'm like, well, the billing doesn't even come from the doctor.
And it doesn't have anything to do with the doctor's performance or knowledge. Yeah. I told Kelly the other day, I'm having a major surgery in 2 months. I'm having, because my lupus and my medicines are eating my joints. So I have to have a hip replacement very young, unfortunately. Thank you so much. And you know what? I'm very lucky because the doctor I'm having do it, he's being in the medical community. I know who's good, but he's one of the best in the US.
Oh that's
incredible. He is very good, but he had a bad day one day when I saw him and I'm thinking this asshole and his attitude. And I literally almost canceled the surgery, but he is especially with all my medical problems, he is one of the best around. And I trust him. The next time I saw him, he was the doctor I knew, but he had a bad interaction before me, and he was kind of in a grumpy mood. And I was like, I just needed to give him a day. And then he was fine.
They're humans.
You can say, you know what? I need you to be this for me right now.
Yes.
This is what I did with my neurologist. I need you to listen to what I'm telling you. And I didn't say it, but in a different way, I said it like, and put the ego over here. And I need you to hear what I'm telling you. And it like triggered in his head, oh, I'm not acting proper.
And it's so important to communicate your needs to your doctor. Like within endometriosis, I have to kind of walk right into a doctor's office and say like, I'd like to maintain my fertility for later, but I'm not here to talk about pregnancy. And the doctors that continue to talk about pregnancy are not doctors I continue to see. But
I love that.
That's a small instance within endometriosis, but with everything, I think you kind of have to walk in and say like, I need these things from you because you're the patient. They're there for you, not the other way around. It's hard to remember that in a weird way. It shouldn't be.
Agree with you 100%.
They see a lot of patients. Insurance companies are putting them under a huge amount of pressure.
Terrible.
Like I see a lot of complaints of people saying, well, my doctor didn't spend a lot of time with me. Well, A, you need to assert that you need more time with them if you're not getting your questions answered. B, there are apps now, especially in larger communities, bigger hospitals, and that you can just message your doctor if you forgot to ask a question. Most doctors actually kind of prefer that. They'll be like, message me through the app and I'll get back to you. So there's ways to get your questions answered, but they have to see a certain number of patients a day based on their practice's rules.
Right.
And it's hard for them. Or like,
Agreed.
So I don't like, yes, there are some really bad doctors out there, but you have to differentiate between someone who is completely misdiagnosing everybody.
Right.
or over prescribing medication to a bunch of people or whatever they're doing versus someone who is just having a bad day or absolutely ignores everything. You know, there's different.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, you have to find the doctor that works for you, and it might not be that it's not a good or a bad doctor. So like my doctor that in my timeline is kind of the bad guy. Sometimes something breaks or something, and we go, Doctor, I'll use a fake name. We say, oh, that was Dr. Smith's fault. Like in my house, that she's just the bad guy. But she's awesome.
I love that.
Yes, it just is what it is. But at the same time, she was one of the nicest doctors I saw. She was my first doctor. She's a gynecologist, not a specialist. She really delivers a lot of babies. So that takes up a lot of her headspace, a lot of her time. She doesn't focus on endometriosis. We weren't a good fit. She's also attached to a giant hospital. She does like appointment after appointment after appointment. And I don't think that's a good setup for most chronically ill people.
Nope.
But that doesn't make her a bad doctor. Like I said, I think she made a mistake not referring me out. And I can sit here and say she made that one mistake, but I know she delivers people's babies every day. She probably saves lives. She's awesome. Not for me. And I think that's okay.
Well said. I love that.
Well, not the first rheumatologist, the second rheumatologist I saw, she point blank said to me, I think you have EDS, but I'm not an EDS specialist. So I'm not 100% sure. And she referred me out.
That's amazing.
That's what they should do.
You say that. That's it. It's just, this isn't for me. I feel like my doctor could have said, hey, I focus a lot on babies and this has nothing to do with babies. Yeah. Go somewhere else.
Exactly. Well, I think some doctors are afraid you're going to take it as they don't want to see you.
Right. It's hard to communicate.
Because some doctors don't know how to phrase it the way my rheumatologist phrased it. I don't know enough about this, but here are some other. She went to the office during the appointment, got me a list of other people to see.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Me to them and make sure I had appointments with them.
Yeah.
Same thing with my eye doctor when I was having spasms. My eye doctor made the appointment with the neuro-ophthalmologist with me.
Wow. That's
wonderful.
It should be.
Yeah, that's just, those are the doctors you want to see. Those are the doctors that are going to really take care of you.
Agreed.
And that want the best for you, even if they can't provide the treatment for you.
Yes, absolutely. I think you can go in and you can advocate for yourself and you can try to set these guidelines that you need. But at the end of the day, a doctor that's been being a doctor for forever probably isn't going to change a whole lot. And if it's just not a good fit, it's just not a good fit. You can advocate for yourself and make yourself known, but you're not going to change the way they do their job every day.
Yeah.
I mean,
nope.
No, it's who they are and it's what they've been doing and it's really worked for them so far. So yeah, it's hard and it's part of what we deal with in our community and it's part of the burden in our communities.
Yeah,
so
absolutely
carry that with us. But I love that you're talking about advocating for yourself because that's so it's so much I think what people need to hear. I hear so much of people in our groups, being like, my doctor rejected me or I didn't get what I needed. And it's like, well, and I don't want to go after them because that's just mean of me being like, ask. Because online that comes across as very rude.
It does.
So hard.
It's different. It's different if you know someone, you say, hey, did you ask this? But online you can't tell because they don't know you. It's
like you can ask it nicely in a face-to-face, like, oh, well, did you ask these questions? Like in a really nice way.
Right.
But online it comes across as
judgy.
Yeah.
Judgy and
So I love that you're talking about that because it's something I think we talk about a lot with Nicole and I on the podcast, and we try to tell people like ask the questions.
For sure.
You can push. The worst thing your doctor is going to say is, I don't want to see you anymore.
Yeah.
And you know what? Then that's not the doctor for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think while we have bodily autonomy, we're in charge of our own healthcare and in charge of our body. And it's so much easier to say than do. And you really have to like get into the mindset. I wasted so many doctor's appointments not coming in with a list of my symptoms or a list of my questions, and also writing down their answers and leaving with it because I'll forget it in 5 seconds.
Me too.
It sounds so simple.
That's why we created the planner.
Oh my God, I've been wanting, it's in my, I'm shouldn't be buying things, but I may be buying a planner soon.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. That's
we'll
awesome.
talk about that later. But it's part of why we created this because we were like, oh my gosh, how do you keep track of, especially because I'm more newly diagnosed.
Yeah.
I was like, how am I going to keep track of this? I see like 17 doctors and
a full-time job.
It is. And I'm used to it now because I've been sick for 20 years. So like anything that happens where I'm well, I don't know how to handle that.
That makes
That's so true.
like, what is this? What's happening?
I'm like, this is a good
today.
thing. I know. I tell Kelly, I'm like, I feel okay right now. Maybe I'm dying.
Well, I've definitely made the mistake though of feeling okay and then being like, I can just do everything.
Yes.
And then the next day
ladies.
in a ridiculous way.
That's actually funny. I'm working on writing something. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. I might just put it on my website. But about like, it sounds so, I feel like this might be taboo to say, but low pain or no pain. Sometimes you're like, it's not that you miss your pain, but you're like,
yeah,
what's happening? Like,
yes.
it's scary.
Or you get that glimmer of hope that it's gone forever.
Yes.
Yes.
Always, every single time.
You have to write about that. You should totally do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
But
we need to talk. That is definitely something that is not talked about in our community.
And you sound like a crazy person.
Yes.
Even my fiance, who's, by the way, amazing with all of this. I was healthy when we met, and like 2 months into dating, all of this started, and he's just been there. He's amazing.
That's awesome.
The one thing he cannot seem to understand is when I wake up with no pain and I'm like, babe, oh my God, like I'm terrified. He's like, do you want to maybe go for a walk or like eat one of your foods that you can't normally eat? Which also is like, give yourself more pain.
Yes.
He's like,
or you pinch yourself, you're like, am I dead?
Yes. But he's like having so much trouble understanding that because of course he is, because it makes no sense.
No.
Yeah, I think that's
the thing about pain-related chronic illness is that it does not make sense. It doesn't. But you are going to have good days and you are going to have bad days and you are going to have really, really bad days.
Yep.
Yes.
But on your good days, we tend to push ourselves because we're like, finally, I can
get some stuff done.
Yep.
And then
put yourself into more pain.
Yes.
Cause a flare up. Yeah.
There's a lot of times I'll text Kelly and I'm like, I was feeling perfectly fine, Kelly. And I'm like, and now I'm so freaking sick. I'm doubled over, nauseous, about to throw up. And I'm like, but 20 minutes ago, I felt like $1 million.
And I say, why did you go clean the bathroom? That was a terrible idea.
And then that goes back to that guilt.
Yes.
Just to know not to clean.
I do now.
But it's so hard, like, just to live in your own body and get punished for eating or moving or doing anything. And it's so hard to like, it's not your fault that you're chronically ill, but it's like, am I not being chronically ill well enough? Like, it's so hard not to feel guilty all the time.
Yeah,
agreed.
You're like, okay. Yeah. Am I not doing this right?
Right. It feels like everyone else might have a better hold on this than me.
Yeah, there's the funny thing is, it's imposter syndrome for the chronically ill. It's
insane.
Well said.
Within that, and how often we like before having a diagnosis, I talked myself out of having a diagnosis for so long and thought the pain was in my head for so long, and having those doctors that minimize that pain does not help with that.
No,
but like, there are real, obviously, instances where you can physically feel pain and really believe it, and it's something neurological. Like that is a real thing. And it's so hard not to constantly be worried about that, especially before having a diagnosis. Like now I can think that, and then I can pull out the images of the endometriosis in my body that they took. But before that, it's terrifying, and it's so easy to get in your own head and fight back and forth with yourself, and that ultimately sets you backwards. But it's your own head, your own body. You can't get away from it.
Like, really I'm having a good day. Was I really sick?
Right.
Yeah.
And you realize the next day after, when you're paying for everything, you're like, I was really sick.
If I have a good day once in a blue moon, I think to myself, okay, maybe it is in my head. And the doctor was right the first time. Maybe I'm just crazy. And then the next day you're like, okay, I'm doubled over the toilet and I'm just about to puke. And I feel my migraines kicking in. I'm like, so I guess this isn't part of my imagination.
Literally. I'm like, well, this would be kind of crazy if my body was capable of making all this.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, wow, that's a.
But you also have to come back and say, why would I make this up?
Right.
Yes. Who wants to actually make this up? Because this is insane.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm standing in the kitchen and I completely am disoriented as to where I am, because that's happens to me a lot of times. I get really dizzy.
That makes sense.
And I'm completely disoriented. I'm like, who would make this feeling up?
Right.
Yeah. Who wants this?
Nobody wants this.
Unless you're like Munchausen syndrome or something.
On roller coaster, okay? I do not want to be standing in my kitchen dizzy.
Yes. And it's funny too, because like, I guess the thought would be that you're making it up for attention, but then look at how people treat chronically ill people.
Right? I don't have that kind of attention.
Exactly.
We don't get attention. We get told to just deal with it and get over it. What do you mean?
That's right.
Yeah.
Pull your straps up, your bootstraps up. Yeah, that's what we get told. It's like, I'm not going to fake something that people treat me like crap.
Right. And I think especially with like endometriosis, because again, female body parts, we don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yes. Like that would be a terrible illness to like make up, because no one's going to want to talk to you about it.
Right. That it's like the taboo-ness around it. Who would ask for that?
It's like
exactly.
It's like telling someone, oh, I have to go to pelvic floor therapy.
No one wants to hear it.
I don't.
It's so my family and I, like I said, we're really open, like girl stuff, and also just like we're family. We tell each other everything. But like, they want to hear about my appointments, and when my appointments like surround my sex life, and I have to go into my little family group chat and be like, appointment was good, we're gonna do all these things. Like, I don't want to live this life.
Filter?
No, I do not do this.
It's also why you need some people that you can just tell everything. Like Nicole is my person that I can just dump out.
I love
all
that.
Those things that are happening to my body, all the weird things that my doctor and I are talking, and we dump that on each other.
We do, because Kelly's my person too, and we're so grateful to have each other.
I love that.
There's awesome. No taboo to say anything that's happening between us, because we're just very open about it, and I think it really can help you to have like that one or two people that you can just blurt out all the gross things you discussed with your doctor or what's happening with your body.
And they get it.
One of my favorite friendships when someone starts to say like, this might be too much information. And it's like, there's no such thing. Tell me all of it.
That's one of my favorite. I'm like, oh, I love this person already.
So important.
I like the TMI people. It's all good.
Me too.
Why would you want like close friends that you can't actually be close with and tell them, especially when you have a chronic illness, gross stuff is a big part of our life.
It really is.
Yeah.
So much a part of our lives.
We're nasty, really. I'm just
so true.
Well, Nicole and I have both worked with like Gero patients, and things like that. And let me tell you, there's a certain time in your life where even if you're a healthy person, things happen to your body and you're like, oh my gosh. Or like my friend, the first friend who got pregnant in our group of friends, in college, right after college, my first one who got pregnant, I didn't know that much about having a baby. And she was like, I didn't know there was a thing called the mucus plug. And I learned a lot from my friends who had babies that made me go, yeah, I don't think that's for me.
Yeah.
Like, they don't tell you that you poop on the table. I was like, whoa. See, I'm very open about this stuff. Sorry, guys, if you're listening and we're talking about this.
I had to watch it in labor and delivery, and I was like, oh my God, that's horrible. And everyone in my class had a baby, and I was the only one who didn't. And they were like, doesn't that make you want to have a baby? I was like, you've done the exact opposite. You confirmed my decision.
Yes.
Yeah. My mom is a gastrointestinal nurse.
Oh, so bless her heart.
Yeah, we hear a lot. We call it guts and butts.
Yes, guts and butts.
Yeah, it is what it is. There's no TMI here. I love it.
No, I love it too. My mom's a nurse too, so there's no TMI here either.
Awesome. and I grew up in a family of nurses.
Thank you.
Yes,
my aunt
too.
My aunt wanted me to be in the delivery room with her, and her husband freaked out. Because he was like, it's my child. And I'm like, but I want to be in there. I want to do the gross stuff.
Let me in.
And just also a nurse. And yeah, but I guess it prepared me for later when all this stuff was happening to my body.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I couldn't talk about the things that were happening, for the most part. There's just some things, my family doesn't need to know, but Nicole knows.
That's right. That's right.
But we are very open about the things that are happening to our bodies. So
totally.
And because a lot of them were nurses, we would talk this stuff over at the dinner table, and
no one cares.
There's some people who are like, I need to not eat my food. Sorry.
And I think that's probably why the three of us sitting here can more easily talk about it and can, beyond our own healthcare, advocate that for others. I think it's so important, even for healthy people, like I said, to not be like, oh, it's my time of the month. No, I have a period. I'm bleeding now.
That's right.
I was the kid in high school, even before endometriosis, with my tampons. I would hold them like this to the bathroom with my hands above my head, like, I have a tampon. I'm going to the bathroom.
I love that. You are awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Bodily functions should not be taboo. I mean, I get it if you don't want to talk about all of that, but in the grand scheme of things,
they shouldn't be taboo.
No,
It's a natural thing for the body.
Yeah,
that's right.
Those weird, gross things, they happen to everybody.
Everybody.
You know, I'm going to say it. Everybody pees, everybody poops, everybody farts, everybody burps.
That's right.
Facts.
You know,
we all have total facts.
I'm not
right?
going to say all women have a period because that's not
true. I don't anymore.
But you know, most women have a period. Right. It's
normal.
Part of who we are. Like, you know, you get old and hair grows out of your ears and your nose.
And not talking about it
is foolish.
Right. Yeah. It's foolish. It creates misconceptions, which lead to foolish decisions. Like,
that's right. Roe versus Wade. That's right. That is 100% true.
Yes. Yes. It's so important to talk about it from the get-go. Healthy people, just everybody, just normalize. We all have a body. I don't know why it's weird to have a body.
I know. And if we can get healthy people on board,
that's on TV. I love the bent carrot commercial.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I think it is one of the best, like, because, you know, you can't show a penis on TV. You just, like regular TV. So instead they use a carrot as an example, and it's so perfect.
Yes.
If you have a bent carrot,
I love it.
Call us. Like, oh my gosh, what a great way to represent it in a society that can't just say on TV, if you have a bent penis, it's a call. Like, this is what the disease is called.
You have to dance around like censorship, but it's important that we do that work and we do dance around it. We talk about all the nasty stuff.
About that. Like,
absolutely.
You know, we're sitting here talking about women's reproductive health, but there's also issues with men's reproductive health.
For sure.
It's important to talk about all of our bodies.
It is. It should be. And nothing reproductive should be a bad or taboo. It should be open, and we shouldn't be like, oh, that's things we don't talk about. No, it should be things we talk about. There's nothing wrong with our bodies.
Right. I think people get a little stuck on that. Like what you were saying, like where men's reproductive health is important too. A lot of people think like we only care about women's reproductive health, where first of all, obviously we need to level the scales, but also I think it's pretty factual at this point to say that the bodies of people assigned female at birth are more complex. Like we do have a reproductive system with more complex issues.
Yes.
But erectile dysfunction does affect like half of men, whereas endometriosis affects 20% of women. So I can see where that...
Well, and men have a lot of problems with their prostates, especially as they get older, they get BPH and everything.
Absolutely.
And that's important too. And, you know, we're not saying that's not important. We're just saying the field is not level.
Exactly. Like on the other side of the same coin, like I said, more people have ED than have endometriosis, but the research is not proportionate. It's not proportionate of 50% of men and 20% of women. It's like they're acting like no women have endometriosis.
Agreed.
So leveling the playing field.
It's important.
Yeah, but I mean, you also look at it like there's men that also have chronic illnesses that affect the reproductive health.
Absolutely.
And then let's try to take a man who has fertility issues and a woman who has fertility issues, or both from chronic illness, and let's have them get married and see what happens then, or genetic issues and all of this. And I'm not saying don't date or marry who you're going to marry. That's not it, but the more we understand about all of these illnesses, the more we understand about our health in general and in specifics, the more we can treat these things, or maybe, in a miracle world, find cures for these things that can help.
Absolutely. And there's so many, and there's so many like intersections to that. Again, I feel like I don't mean to only speak about endo like it only affects endo. That's just what I'm versed on, obviously. But I know a lot of trans men that have a lot of issue getting healthcare because they have endometriosis, because they were assigned female at birth. They have all the anatomy to have endometriosis, but they're a man. And if it's ironically, they see it as a good thing. They pass, they're seen as a man, which is great. But then they have these problems where they're living as a man with endometriosis. And there's people with great intentions that feel like women aren't treated equally to men. So they're like, men don't have endo. You don't talk about that. Men don't talk about these issues. And they're a man with
endometriosis. That's right. It's 100% right.
That's another part of that privilege where I can do my best to advocate for that. I try my hardest to not use like gendered language if I can help it. That's a big like goal of mine, being on that patient advisory board for that app.
I love that.
I call them out every time they say something that's too like just gendered. But I don't know. I think it's important, I'm privileged. I won't fully understand that because I'm a cis white woman. I don't have to personally deal with those burdens.
Right. And I think that's a really great point, because we are all sitting here as cis white women, in women at birth.
Right.
Versus it being a choice. But also the whiteness makes a difference, because women of color are oftentimes even more underdiagnosed.
Absolutely.
Female reproductive issues.
Yes.
And the research shows that in very significant ways. They're insanely underdiagnosed, because I've heard terrible stories of doctors being like, well, Black women can handle more pain.
Yep. That is a huge misconception. And there's a lot of racial biases. Someone I know that's a healthcare provider, I don't want to out them. They were talking to me about how they learned from this mistake. They don't still believe this, but how they used to believe that Hispanic women are more dramatic. So when they would come in complaining about their pain, they would hear 8 and say, well, that's more like a 5 or a 6, because they have that. And they had to unlearn that. And what's hard too is you want to be so mad at these individuals believing it, but it's what they were taught. And that's why we really have to break down we need total reform of how a lot of chronic illnesses are treated, because doctors aren't being taught correctly from the get-go.
They're not. And I was very surprised. You know what? As a Black woman in the medical field, I did not even know this, but did you know that as I speak to women, like Black women that work in the field that have been patients, they always say doctors are to Black women what police are to Black men.
Wow.
That broke my heart. Yeah. It just, when I heard that, I finally got it.
Yeah.
Like I didn't get it. Exactly. I was like, oh my God. I was just heartbroken by that.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it almost reminded me of the conversations that were happening more in like 2020 about cops, when we were talking about how there's like good doctors and there's bad doctors.
Yes.
But I would probably argue something similar about cops, that if you truly are a good doctor, I would hope that you're doing your work to fight against the bad doctors and the misconceptions. And that's what really, to me, shows like not all cops, not all doctors. Like if you're doing the work to combat where there are issues, if you're a doctor who's like dismissing that those issues even exist, even if you yourself are doing good, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So we've definitely talked for quite a while, and I could talk forever.
This is awesome.
I am so appreciative of you, Madison, for coming on. I'm so excited for people to hear this episode. I think it's an important topic, and you're welcome to come back anytime.
Yes. Yes, please do, Madison. Please come back and talk more about what you're doing again. But I also want to make sure that I repeat again, Sour Collective.
Yes.
That is the magazine.
Yes.
And you are on TikTok. Are you on Instagram, Facebook?
Yes, I'm pretty much everywhere. The Sour Collective stuff, it's at the Sour Collective, or thesourcollective.com. My shop, by the time this goes out, my shop will be open. Currently, as we're filming, my shop is closed because I'm participating in the Mother's Day strike against overturning Roe versus Wade, but I'll be back open, so that doesn't matter. But I'm at the Sour Collective on all social media. And then for the Endo Resistance Project, I'm just at Endo Resistance on everywhere. I'm on social media all the time.
So Me too. I recommend everybody follow and join in the discussion. And, we promote every time. You guys can follow us at thechronicspoonful.com. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And we're kind of on Twitter, but I'm really bad at updating it.
Me too.
And Madison, I just followed you from my personal account because I love your stuff. So you'll see my name pop up. It'll say Nikki or Nicole or something.
I'm looking forward to it. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on.
Made my day, my weekend, my month.
you are awesome.
Having you. And you guys, we will be back on soon. So thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.